A lot's happened since yesterday!
Welcome to another very crazy special edition of A Lot's Happened Since Yesterday. I'm actually honored to be able to talk to our guest today. It came out of the blue. I was talking to Ralph. He said, hey, I know this guy. I was like, you got to be fucking kidding me. We have to have him on. Let's do this. To have a little bit of a background for you people not growing up in the California area, I want to give you a little background on a radio station called KCAL, 96.7 KCAL Rocks, by the way. If you were a rocker and you grew up in the Inland Empire specifically and also around SoCal, you know this station well. It brought up your bands. It showed up support for your bands. It put shows together. You had the great morning shows. The reason I bring that up is because our guest is very, very instrumental in that station, which means he is very, very instrumental in my personal career as an entertainer, in my bands, the people that I've been around. A lot of the people in my industry and a lot of my closest friends were touched by this man in more ways than we can count and were affected in more ways than we can count. Ralph, who do we have with us today, my friend?
We have a good friend of mine now. He and I have known each other now. It's going on about 2 years now, I think. And actually, we talked about it much earlier on, but Jim James. I don't know if the name is familiar, but if you live in the San Bernardino area, most likely you know who Jim James is. Jim James is the founder of KCAL. And so we happen to have him on. He's our guest today. Jim, how you doing?
Doing great, guys. Thanks a lot, Cody, for that introduction. And likewise there, my friend Ralph.
Well, sir, I can't. I mean, when Ralph told me about you and I started thinking about it and I started looking back and I'm like, my God, man, when I was coming up as a musician, there wasn't a night that I wasn't listening to that station. And for you to bring what it bring, I mean, come on, how can we not say it? I mean, you have been a direct influence on our upbringing and our career upbringing. I mean, it's a big deal to me, sir.
Yeah, also on the Inland Empire. It was an interesting time. It started back in 1968, believe it or not.
Good God.
I worked for my father. He had an AM station called KCAL, 1410 on the dial, Spanish. And when he purchased it, little did he know it came along with an FM license. And he decided to put it on the air. And I think he did it in around, maybe 1964 or 65. And he had it on the top of one of his AM towers out there on Green Spot Road in East Highlands. And the signal was so terrible, I don't think it got past like Riverside Avenue as you went out the 10 freeway. But it was the beginning of turning a station. Initially, he got the idea to do elevator music, strings and things, and Ferranti and Teicher, the pianists, and some vocals from, Johnny Mathis, that type of real easy listening, middle of the road type format. And I came along in 1968, the summer, and said, hey, let's do some rock and roll. There's some stuff happening in LA. And that's when we had KNAC, KNAC down in Long Beach. KLOS was KABC, KMET. We also had the old KPPC FM, which is now K-Rock. So they're all getting into this sort of, K-Rock was doing its sort of new age alternative rock, but the KMET and KBC were doing progressive album-oriented rock. And I said, what the heck, let's give that a shot. San Bernardino needs an outlet like that. So we started doing about 2 hours a night, going from strings and things up until about 10 o'clock at night. Then from 10 to midnight for 2 hours, it would be just blowout rock and roll.
Hey, Jim, let me stop you for 1 second. I didn't want to cut you off for a second, but what exactly does album-oriented rock mean? Like, how does that work?
Most of the songs we played came off of albums. We weren't single-oriented. So instead of imagining having a 45, putting it on the turntable, when the album came in, wham, I stuck it on, and I drove the record companies nuts because they always wanted to concentrate on one song. the
Right.
first single, and they wanted it to be beaten to death. Everybody just milk it as much as you could. Then they'd go, okay, here's our second song.
Yeah.
So, in addition to programming the station and doing the music, I would sit down when an album came in, I'd listen to it and pick three, four, five songs and instantly start playing them in rotation. So that's a good definition of album oriented rock.
Gotcha.
Everything came off the LP.
So it wasn't just here's the one song, play it. You got to choose whatever you wanted to play off the album straight away.
Correct.
That's
Well,
see, that's the fun stuff, man.
we already got a little bit of a glimpse into your line of reasoning behind what you did there with the album oriented rock. Because you just said that, you know, the beat the single to death, you know, play
Right.
it over and over. So, but I got to ask you, in your mind, in your head, Jim, what was the reason that you decided to go that route? Because that's a big decision, right?
Sure. Well, first off, the signal of the station was really weak, not very popular, didn't have a good coverage, so the station wasn't really doing that well. And I knew that something like this rock and roll, which was breaking out across the country then, would
Mm.
be something that would catch on. And so
What year was this?
1968.
Oh,
It was ju-
68. Oh, okay.
it was just in the summer. I think it was only for about 2 or 3 months that we tried it, and then I went off, tried college for about a year, and didn't like that. So came back, and then '69 started doing it regularly, and it was always at night. Started off 10 to midnight, then it grew 9 to midnight. Then I got it to about 8 to midnight, and it stayed there for a few years. Then it got extended to 1 a.m. and then 2 a.m. So we're having now about a 6 hour show. And slowly through the years, it gained so much popularity that we turned the whole station to that format. But I also was instrumental in finding the new transmitter site, which is up off of Highway 18 as you're going up towards Crestline. There was an old television site up there, the Sun Telegram newspaper in San Bernardino. That's where it broadcast a TV station. And they had an engineer who would stay up there, and they got sold, or the TV station went away. Something happened to it back then. And so there was an opportunity to purchase the whole thing, and I missed it just by about a month. The person who got ahead of me was Dr. Roberts of KQLH, which is now KFrog. So, but we ended up finding a site that was one of the best low power FMs in the country, the entire country. Back then, we only had 3,000 watts up against 100,000 watts from LA.
Mm.
So, at our height and our power, you could hear us all the way out to the valley before you go into Santa Ana. You could hear us all the way out to the Kellogg Hill. In other words, we filled in the entire valley. It was a pretty amazing transformation.
Right. Nice. Very cool. Very cool. So, what was your plan from there? I mean, how did you? I know you said your father owned the station. Um, did you have to go and take classes or something to become? Because what were you officially considered? What was
Well,
your?
things were a lot different back then. There always had to be a first class ticket issued by the Federal Communications Commission, which meant you knew enough about a transmitter to be able to adjust the power output, look at certain readings to make sure that it was running correctly.
Mm,
So you had to go to school for that, and you had to learn, some math, some trig, and some engineering, AC and DC. So I went somewhere in Hollywood and took the class, the Don Martin School of Broadcasting. I think that's what it was, and
wow.
came back with a first class ticket. So now I can sit there and operate the station, and at the same time, I started becoming a DJ. I did everything you could do at the station. I started
Okay.
off as janitor and ended up as general manager. A to Z. I did everything you could think of.
Wow. So, God, that's what I was going to ask you. Your official title, I thought you were the program director, but you were everything.
Yeah. Initially,
Okay.
when I first got into it, I was a disc jockey. Then
Okay.
I was the music director. Then the program director. So the music director takes care, listens to all the music, figures out the rotations, and sets up the whole sound of the station. Then the program director comes along and figures out the rest of the personality of the station, usually in hour increments, where we have a little news break, where we do our commercial breaks, how we do our promotions and our station IDs. So I would set that all up, and we had really the only open format in Southern California because my father owned the station. I could have played, harp music followed by Led Zeppelin, followed by Benny Goodman. I could have done anything. In fact, I did something similar to that even before the rock started. We had an opportunity to do variety radio. Imagine this as a format. You hear a song from the 30s and 40s, then you hear a song from the 40s and 50s, then a song from the 60s and 70s. So we would just slowly move up in 1 or 2 decades. And that's like going to McDonald's and them having 1,000 items on the menu. You're not going to really cater to any one specific person. So eventually, I got it whittled down to sort of like an easy listening light rock, sort of like KNXFN was years ago. So as program director, I was also responsible for hiring all the talent. And one of the first individuals I hired was John Leslie, who was one of our more popular disc jockeys, who unfortunately isn't with us anymore. But that was where a lot of the fun came in when I could put that together. I also, as program director, would sit there and critique the jocks. Nobody does that anymore. You hear people say stuff and do stuff that you're scratching your head. So, and real subtle things like I'd hear a disc jockey going, "Well, this is welcome to my show, and I'm having a wonderful time today." And I would call him up and says, "Hey, we're a family. Don't give the impression that this is your show. It's not. It's our show. We're a family." So little things like that, and then you'd critique them to improve their responses to interacting with callers or doing contests or how they present themselves opening up a concert or doing a promotion out in front of the public.
That's
So,
crazy.
yeah.
That's crazy interesting.
From
This
then, I
is
moved up to station manager. So I'm running everything now, including the sales department
wow.
and dealing with the engineer, and eventually got up to general manager.
Wow. Very cool. That must have been an exciting time for you.
It was. And the next thing I had to do when I was getting all that together was getting all the record companies to be aware that KCAL FM existed out in the Inland Empire. So I had to truck to LA. And I think one of my first hits was A&M Records. There was a connection I had there with Jan Basham and another gal. And believe it or not, when I first did the show, I had 6 albums. That was it. That was the library of the record or radio station.
Holy
So I
crap.
was desperate to enhance that, and I would go out there and come back with all of their new products. So that's how I sort of developed the relationship with all of the record companies and the record promoters. And there was a lot of interesting motivations back then to get you to play a song. I think you were hinting around, Ralph, at Payola.
Yes, payola. That is exactly what I wanted to talk to you about because I know that back then at that time it was the early stages. No.
Right. Well,
Okay.
remember, you would know this as an upcoming band. You want to find a few venues. You go out to a nightclub, and it's always pay as you play.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Oh
Well,
yeah.
you had to pay them in order to present yourself to an audience because nobody knew who you were. Well, pay to play, that was sort of the concept behind payola.
Mm.
It could get very blatant to where you're getting drugs and gals for adding music, but usually it was tickets to go here, concerts to go there, backstage this, backstage that, and they would wine and dine you.
A lot of favors, huh?
Yeah, because they
Yeah.
wanted you to add the music.
Right. Right. Wow. So, what were your thoughts on that? Did you partake?
I would partake in everything that was legal. I didn't get into the drugs or um, any of the females that were offered, but
So you didn't have any fun with it. Okay.
yeah, no, I know I was I wanted to have a good impression. So yeah, I sort of stuck with just the goodies. In fact, I remember one time I got really sick. I got a bad case of the flu, and one of my tighter relationships with the promoters out there was Kenny Ryback. And there's a knock at my door one day, and I opened it up, and the Altadena Dairyman had delivered an entire assortment of kefir, yogurt, sour cream, milk, chocolate milk, the whole shebang, and a little note, Jim, get better from Kenny. So little things like that, they always went out of their way to sort of treat you special.
Well, do you think that do you think there's a line between that? I mean, at what point is it considered just, being a part of
Well,
the industry and helping a guy out and yeah, maybe kissing ass a little bit, throwing some stuff your way, and then it's like, okay, now you're just trying to bribe somebody. Like, where do you think that line is?
well, it was very definite with me. I would never give anybody the impression they could control me. I had mafia come up and say, "Hey, will you have this and this and that, whatever?" And I just didn't want to get involved in it. I even got into some tough little disagreements, I guess, with some of the promoters when I was really adamant about not adding something when I had a really good relationship with them. So I never wanted anybody to know that they could compromise me because then I wasn't my own man. It wasn't my own project. It didn't have my stamp on it. So
I love it. I love it. I can't imagine some of the tough shit you had to go through though. Like you said, how do you say no to the mob if they're trying to get you to play something if you're not feeling it? It had to have been
right,
rough, man.
right. Well, initially you say no instantly, so they know there's no chance. If you're going, oh, okay, well, I'll go out to dinner with you. Who knows? People get into trouble at times, especially when you've had some alcohol in you. So,
And that makes sense. If you don't humor it at all, then you don't even get in a chance to get in trouble because he's like
right.
he won't even take the meeting. Forget about it.
Yep.
That makes sense.
But it was a lot of fun. Um, so many backstage stories. In fact, I have a really it cracks me up because I couldn't believe that I was this ignorant. I get invited to A&M Records on the lot for one of the latest releases of the group Free, and they were flying in from San Francisco, and they were late, sort of fogged in. Something happened, so the A&M told all the people there, "Hey, go ahead, wander around the lot." So I just start moseying off, and I walked into a sound studio because I heard somebody recording, and I identified who it was. It was Carole King doing her first album. And I'm sitting there just walking around listening to it. You couldn't go in because she was recording. And I sat down on this little bench right next to a guy. Okay. And then I turned to the guy and says, "Hey, how are you doing?" He goes, "Fine." I says, "Well, what do you do? Looks like you play guitar." And he says, "Yeah, I play guitar and I sing." And says, "Oh, that's pretty cool." And he goes on like this, humoring me like this for about 4 or 5 minutes. Then there's a break in Carole King recording. There's silence, and she comes on out, and she walks up to this guy and go, "James." It was James Taylor.
Wow.
He's sitting there pulling my left leg, pretending, acting like he was a normal human. So I thought that was a kick.
Acting like he's a normal human. Yeah, oh my gosh, dude.
That's
So
pretty cool,
when
man.
did you guys get into KCAL FM?
Holy crap. When was the first time they played us, man?
It's been a while. I mean, we've gotten in the past. I had another band that Cody was the guitar player in called Serpent Underground, and we got a lot of the local spotlight stuff from KCAL. We got it from what was it? What was the other one? 91X.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
Right.
yeah, and
Mhm.
we even got KLOS to play us with the most recent band with Ravenscroft. So we've gotten airplay from a lot of these stations, and we've gotten to know a few of the DJs and stuff. So KCAL, I've been listening to them for a while. I still listen to them this day. So what do you think about their format now? It's just basically like
Yeah,
I,
everybody plays it safe now.
yeah.
They all play usually stuff that has been focus grouped or auditoriumed. And the problem with that is when they test a song, they usually only test the hook, which is the part that the people can usually remember. And sometimes people will not remember the song that well unless they hear it from the beginning.
They don't play the whole song.
No, you're lucky if
That's dumb.
5 to 10 seconds you get just little snippets because they have about 300 songs they want to test. They have about 150 people in the auditorium. They don't want it to go on for like days. So yeah, you get about a 5 to 10 second snip. So the feedback is got some air in there because you're not always identifying the song because of the hook. You sometimes identify it because you know how it starts.
Right.
So, and they would sit there and just come up with a list. These are the most popular or the favorite top 300 songs, and that's what you would hear on an FM station now. Remember, top 40 was the top 40 singles on AM. 40 songs over and over and over again. Now most FMs are dealing with 200 and 300 songs over and over and over again. Uh, KCAL FM's library was thousands deep, and we didn't just stick to anything routine. People could jump off a format every once in a while. In fact, I would do another thing that drove the record companies nuts because they're out to make money. So on Monday through Thursday nights from 10 to 10:30, we did album premiere. I would pull out a brand new album, stick it on the turntable, and let it run. No voice, no commercials, no ads, nothing, even the little space between the songs. So you could imagine everybody recording it. And the audience loved it. You got a whole handle on what the group was like, so you could go out and buy the album if you wanted to. But the KCAL back then, because of my unusual freedom, just was cutting edge on a whole bunch of fronts. Um, we had one of our jocks, Matt Garrett. I had doing a show on Sundays at noon, and we broke format. Remember Frank Zappa and the Mothers of Invention by
Absolutely.
chance?
100%.
He had a daughter. What was her name?
Who, Frank?
Yes,
He had Moon
Moon Unit.
Zappa. Yep, Moon Unit.
Moons.
That's right. And she had a hit, I think was called Valley Girls or something. So she was pretty popular, and I'm really hip hop on wordplay. So I came up with a show called Noon Unit. And just for an hour on Sunday from noon till 1, we would run typical stuff you would hear in K Rock back then, more of an alternative type style, new age, new wave, whatever you wanted to call it. And then we get back into the regular format for a few hours. And then I think it was 5 p.m. on Sunday until 8, I did Love Beat. It was the only station in Southern California interviewing people on the radio, trying to put them together. I think we married about 6 people. We had a few that went out and had long-term relationships, but it's really interesting. You don't have to see somebody. You just can listen to somebody. And you can tell if they're sincere. You can tell if they're intelligent. You can tell if they have warmth and heart. And it was a kick. It was a very successful show.
Right on. Very cool, man. You did some cool things, and that was an exciting time for music as well. So, I mean, I bet you've got a lot more stories to tell
Oh
than
yeah.
that.
Well, back then everything was on turntables too,
Yeah.
on vinyl,
Yeah.
and we used to remove the rubber that would come on the top of the platter and put on felt so we could slip start all of our songs. So
Mhm.
what you would do is you'd turn on you'd cue up your song, when you're coming out of a commercial or you're finished talking,
Hmm.
and you would turn on the turntable, and then you'd put your finger on the edge of the album right about a split second before the song started. So you had instant beginning of a song when you released your finger off the LP. So I go, here's the latest from blah blah, and wham, you take off your finger, and the song's just right there. So we did that. We also, I'm sure there was a person you would remember now, Sammy Hagar.
Oh
Sammy
yeah,
Hagar, yeah,
yeah.
of course.
Oh, this is going to go back to about probably, oh, I can't even remember the year. It's got to be in the 70s. And I get a call from this guy. He says his name is Sammy Hagar and he lives in Fontana. And he wanted to come out to my show. And so I sat there and said, sure, come on in. I'd love to meet you. And so he drives out in an old, battered, like Ford Fairlane or something, a rat trap, comes on out, and we sat and we talked on the show for about an hour. And we became fairly good friends. And we all know what happened to him, right? He turned into having a phenomenal career there with himself and
So
then
this is
and
before
Haley.
he was famous?
Yeah, well, this is how I got famous. We
Oh,
were
really?
we
Oh,
were the
okay.
first station that ever played anything or ever talked about him.
Oh, right
And he
on.
lived in Fontana, so he could hear the station. So he was one of our local Inland
God
Empirers.
damn, that's so crazy, man.
That's really
You
crazy.
forget he lived out there, man. That's
So
oh
yeah,
Yeah.
a lot of interesting stories. There was one time we did a promotion with the Playboy magazine and Playboy Mansion, and we were going to send a couple there. They were going to be part of the Playmate of the Year awards or something like that. They were picked up in a Playboy limo and all this stuff. And go figure, the couple that won was the most nerdiest couple you could ever imagine, and the most out of place at a place like Playboy Club. But I went there. I actually accompanied them and wandered around the whole lot. They have a really interesting bird aviary there, and I noticed something because I'm one of these guys that's has an eye out for detail. I was talking to a lot of the Playboy bunnies. The ones that showed the most skin had the least brains. The ones who, wow, she is classy looking, but you couldn't really see as much. Man, they were sharp as crap. They were just like, so I hate to, sort of label people, but I noticed that everywhere I went, when there was this gal almost, wearing nothing, and I tried to stir up a conversation, I couldn't go anywhere. But it was a kick. It was a lot of fun.
Interesting. I thought you were going to say, you know what? I was talking to a lot of the Playboy bunnies, and I
And then we went
decided.
into the grotto, and what happened after that?
No, I was thinking you would say like, "Hey, I think I could do this Hefner thing." He doesn't have. He's not the only guy in town that can do
yeah,
this.
he's
I
not
think
so hard. It's not so hard to do
I,
that.
I think I can pull this off, being Mr. Hefner.
It was a fun place, though. It was definitely set up for fun. They had a room just full of pinball machines, and the
Yeah,
grotto was fun. It was a nice spa. Yeah, it's a pretty cool
that's cool,
place.
man. That's cool that you got to experience that. It's really,
Yeah.
really awesome. Yeah. So, I mean, Cody, did you have any questions for Jim? Did you have any questions for him? Because I know we were talking about it earlier. You're like,
Well, here's another something for you.
Yeah.
I was the first station to play Black Sabbath
Get
oh,
out of here,
really?
really.
in America. Yep, I
No way.
ended up. I don't know how I did it, but I started getting record releases from England, and I forget the label they were on, Tetragrammaton or something. At any rate, um, yeah, we get this new album. I stuck it on, and I've never seen the phones light up like it did that night. It was unbelievable.
Hmm.
So yeah, we had a lot of fun
So it was well
being the first
received by
ones to play.
it was well received by the people that listened to the
Oh
station.
yeah,
Okay, right on.
Yeah,
What was
requests up
what
the
was
yin
the
yang.
record? Do you remember?
That was the very first one with Black Sabbath on it.
Oh wow,
The
that's
song Black
crazy.
Sabbath. Um, I can't remember. War Pigs, was that the one on it, or the one with the siren at the beginning? But yeah, it was one of the more successful groups that we highlighted. Um, we were also up against, a lot of competition back then, but nobody out here. We were always battling against
Who were
Los
your
Angeles.
competitors at that time?
Well, it was K Rock at 106.7. It was KMET 94.7, a little bit of heaven from 94.7. It was KNAC at 105 something in Long Beach, and KABC FM 95 and a half. And
Right.
back then they had this announcer that they'd slow his voice down to where he was Brother John. Brother John with you here on KABC. And they were doing album oriented rock then.
Hmm.
But the one station that also probably was fairly free form was KMET. And I remember I was an avid fan, and I'm driving down Colorado Boulevard in Pasadena, just passing the first In and Out Burger, and I heard this album come on. It blew my socks off. It was the first time I'd ever heard of Jethro Tull, and I thought that was the name of the guy. So it's just there is a lot of history. I mean, KCAL FM was the first that had a three-man morning team. In fact, he's not there anymore, but as up until about 2 years ago, you had the Stu and the crew,
Oh, right.
uh, Mike Stewart, and I think there was Jim Bob, and then Tiffany.
Yeah, that was the
I
Morning Stiffy crew. I love those guys,
Yeah.
man.
Now I didn't have anything to do with putting that trio together. I put it together before that,
Right.
and it was Mike Stewart or Stu with Bill or Bill Nettie and no Bill Toth and Steve Nettie. And Bill Toth was a stand-up comedian who could do all these voices. And Steve Nettie just had one of these, like a Jim Bob type voice. And the characters that Bill Toth created were unbelievable. He came up with Milo. He was a bum, and he lived out on the dump somewhere in Redlands. There was another guy that he came up with that actually created Mentone Beach. Remember Mentone Beach is one of the reservoirs off of Green Spot Road out there, and people had fun by saying, "Oh yeah, we're out at Mentone
Right.
Beach earlier
Yeah,
today."
yeah.
So, and we had he was Cedric, a black basketball player, and he was just hilarious. It was a very clean morning team because I always wanted the largest audience possible. So I was always telling the folks, make sure that if grandma's in the car, she can enjoy the show. So that really changed when I got out of it and they went into the morning stiffy.
Yeah.
Yes, that's
Yeah.
not for grandma that so much.
No, they were not grandma's cup of tea. That's for
Not
damn
for
sure.
grandma.
But it was a very creative morning show, and not many stations were doing three men. Most of them were two, and I sort of missed that because that was cutting edge. There was
Yeah.
nobody else really out and about doing that.
At what
So
point would you say that the station was just like in its oh shit, things are taking off right now moment?
Um, this will take a few people back. I got friendly with Peter Steinloff, who owned a small billboard company called Independent Outdoor. And instead of the large billboards we're familiar with, he came up with this really nice stainless chrome edge, more like the what do you call it? A rectangle, a smaller rectangle version of the large billboards.
Mhm.
And we hit it off so well that he just came into San Bernardino as a market. He had inked 150 new billboards and said, I don't have any paper to put up, Jim. Go down to LA. Here's a Meyer show print. Give them your logo, have them print up whatever you want. and I'll put them all up. I'll put them all over the county for you for free. So we had overnight everywhere you drove, KCAL FM.
Oh,
And
damn.
I would say that's when things really started taking off. The ratings locally were showing that we were just gaining popularity unbelievably. And there was a automotive store called Super Shops back then,
Hmm.
and they were really into the male 1824 male working on his car. So they would sample their customers, and the one thing coming off of their mouth was KCAL FM. So we really hit home. We would really hit hard with rock and roll, good rock and roll. Inland Empire likes rock and roll.
Hmm.
And the station got so popular, when the concert promoters would come out, they would give me a call. You go, hey, Jim, we want to bring this group out. What do you think? And I go, hey, that'll sell out in 2 seconds. So they responded to it. There was a swing auditorium once down there at the Orange Show, and that's where all the initial concerts happened until I
Hmm.
think a plane crashed into it. But I think the Rolling Stones, that was their first LA show, was at the Swing Auditorium. Similar with Fleetwood Mac, and actually where they
Hmm.
lost a member who turned into a born again. I think his name was Jeremy Spencer, but other groups that sort of got their foothold in Southern California. Def Leppard, I remember, showed up there. Um, I think one of the more ear splattering concerts where I couldn't hear myself for 3 days was Emerson, Lake and Palmer.
Emerson, Lake and Palmer. Wow, I haven't heard them in a while. It's been a hot
Yeah,
minute.
see,
You
this
ain't
is
got in
all
on some ELP, brother?
So yeah, we're all talking about music. I was overseeing from at 68 until about 1990.
God damn it, dude.
Wow.
Just the best years of music like ever.
No question. I mean, yeah,
Fuck.
you had yeah, that was Led Zeppelin. That was Frick the Doors. It was Cream. You had still a lot of the people from the '60s were still popular in the '70s, and then you had the Eagles and Led Zeppelin and um, Fleetwood Mac all come out in the '70s. It was really a prolific time.
It's insane. Absolutely insane.
Wow, that's crazy, man.
So how
So
did you
Cody's
go ahead?
I'm sorry. Oh no, I was just gonna say that I sent Cody those posters. Jim sent me some posters, some really kick-ass posters.
Hmm.
These things are
Well,
cool.
here's the story on the posters. Um, Once again, we're always doing cutting edge stuff. So we would come up with a contest. Anybody in the audience, if they could design our poster, would win $500. And I got a guy who won, and he wasn't that much of a sci-fi. He wasn't into the science fiction that much. So he came up with the odd-looking spaceship with a KCAL logo on the back. And so I said, "Oh, okay." So I then hunted down a local artist production house called, I think, Dream Weavers or DreamWorks. And one of the guys did our first big poster with the wizard. That was our mascot, the KCAL wizard.
That
It was
one was my
really
favorite of
difficult
all the
coming
ones.
up with a wizard that didn't look like Santa Claus or Darth Vader. And the very first one, if you ever saw it, has all these little critters around him, and he's throwing out his hand in a hand sign that says "I love you." From then on, I found an unbelievable artist. He was a comic. He did comic books, and I can't remember his Fawcett. His last name was Fawcett, and he started putting these posters that I gave you, Ralph, together. He would use pencil, whiteout, ink. He was poor, and however he put these together would blew my mind. I would sit down and say we had a little storyboard contest, and the winning listener came up with KCAL FM is battling the what do you call the not the hip hop. Um, I'm trying to remember what we called it back then. The rockers didn't like it. It was like what the Bee Gees were putting out back then. At any
Oh,
rate, it
disco?
was yes, disco. There you go. So we came up with an album where it was the Wizard battling the disco people, and so we would get about 20 to 30 businesses in the Inland Empire that were unique outlets where you could, the only place you could get the latest poster. The poster also had a calendar on it, and the calendar started when the poster came out, not this crap that always starts on January. So if you look back at these things, you could always tell what month and year the poster came out. We would then distribute these. All the people would come back to us with what their take was on the story. So I would talk with the artist, say, "Hey, we're going to have the wizard in a ship and doing all these things." And I think the one I gave you was an underwater scene. He also did one where we're out on Green Spot Road, and the top of the radio station there is a turntable, and the wizard hand is coming out to move the tone arm onto the first song, and the arm's coming out of the logo that is flying above the station.
So
So
cool.
he would just come up with all these unbelievable concepts.
Pretty
And
cool. I gotta say, this one here that I'm looking at right now, um, this is to me when I saw it, because I wasn't that familiar with the older KCAL stuff until I started talking to you. But yeah, it totally reminds me of the Lord of the Rings because it's the wizard, but when you look around and see who's surrounding him, they look like elves or hobbits.
right, that was the first one that we did with the production house
Mhm.
in San Bernardino. That was the first wizard, and
Oh,
that's
okay.
yeah, that's really the second poster. The first one was sort of not a success. I didn't really do much with it. So we
Right.
started off with that one. And I think on the bottom right, it was 1980. And I think the guy who did it was Bing Mala.
Hmm.
That was his name. He, oddly enough, was the guy who created the helmet for uh, the oh, what do you call those guys that hunt down in Star Wars?
The
The hunt,
stormtroopers?
the
Oh, the
Bounty hunters?
stormtroopers.
yes, the bounty hunters. What was the guy in
Boba
the
Fett?
Oh,
yes, he came. He did.
Boba
He
Fett.
created and designed Boba helmet.
Boba
Get
Fett. Okay.
out.
The
Yeah.
guy that did the poster you're talking about
Really?
there, Ralph. Yeah.
Really?
That's
So
so
that
sick.
Wow.
Okay, Ralph, I'm jealous now.
but that one does look very Tolkien-ish. It does look
Yes, it does. It does. Oh, well, what's the deal? What's the history with the one with it looks like what was his name from Twilight Zone? Rod
Rod Serling.
Sterling. Rod Sterling. What's up with that one? That one's kind of cool. I like that one.
Yeah. Well, he just this is how this artist that I just loved would just throw in stuff left and right. Um,
Wow.
yeah, he's got the cone that rotates. He has the mailbox flapping back and forth. This guy could show motion on a 2D that just blew my mind.
Really?
So yeah, it was a lot of fun. If you look up at the top where the arm is coming down, he called those mega nooks and mini crannies. He would just sit there and just make all these little figures, and it looked like a unbelievable
Megan
spaceship. Yes, it was a
and
lot of
Megan
fun.
Green.
And the
That's
people really
funny.
got
That
a
sounds
kick
like
out
an
of it.
album
Imagine
title.
you're listening to the station and you're smoking or you're drinking and you're watching this poster. I'm sure we had a lot of interesting visuals.
So back then, you guys' tagline or your logo or whatever. What do you call that?
The slogan,
The
one
slogan? Yeah. What was it? Was the rock spectrum? Is that what it
yes,
was?
yep,
Okay.
that
Okay.
took me a while to come up with, and you know how creative people can get, just like what they do with In and Out Burger. They take the B and the R off the burger, and it's called In and Out Urge. So,
Yeah.
Oh,
so
sweet
with
Jesus.
I know you hadn't heard that
I have never
with
heard
Yeah.
that, and I've grown up here my entire life. I've never fucking
with
heard that.
with the rock spectrum. Some kid flipped the R and the SP and called it the Spock rectum.
That's
But
fine.
that gives you a good clue because that's really what we were. We played the whole spectrum of rock and roll. Yeah, I thought it was
That's really what you were. Exactly true. Honestly, that is true.
You guys were the
It's like
Spock,
it's
right?
perfect because that's exactly what we were.
That's Spock, right? Oh, hey, that was a good laugh. I don't care what anybody says. No, that's awesome, Jim. So I got to ask you, what do you think about today's radio? What do you think? Are there any stations that you listen to? Are you still listening to KCAL?
Gosh, I'm not so much of a music listener anymore.
Mm,
I listened to so much for so long. All I did was listen to music for like 25, 30 years.
right.
So I get more now into more talk radio, but I do think that we're still a victim of this ratings game. And you have people running the radio stations now that don't have a passion. They don't understand what entertainment is. They're just bean counters, and they've taken a
Mm,
lot of the fun. You don't hear jocks that are that interesting anymore. And I think it's sort of stale, to be honest with you. And it would be nice every once in a while when things get really bad, some operator will allow his program director, I don't know, man, what we're doing isn't working. Let's just try something. Just throw something out there. And I'm waiting for whatever that's going to be the next movement
Yeah.
in radio.
So
And
why'd you leave? Why'd you leave KCAL? I read somewhere on the internet that you started a radio or two radio stations on the Big Island of Hawaii. Is
yeah,
that true?
hmm uh, the reason why I left is because my father got too good of a deal, so he sold it.
Oh, okay.
And
Oh,
with that, I got a piece of the pie, and I went out to the Big Island, and I built an FM in Kona, and I built an FM over in Hilo. That was the first island-wide radio where I was simulcasting. It was a pretty unique system, and I just annihilated the market. Nobody was concerned about this howley coming from the mainland. They Nobody got ready for me, and when I came on, well, for an instance, the ratings in LA, the number one FM will probably get a 6 or 7% share of all the people that listen to radio. That's the number one listened to station in LA. Well, when they did the ratings in Kona, the first book, I had a 57% share, not 7%,
good God.
57.
So over
Wow.
half
A
the
lot of
people in the area was listening to your station.
amazing, amazing. You heard us in every business, you heard us in every convertible, at every intersection, everywhere it went. It blew the socks off of everybody on the island, and even the major stations on Oahu, Honolulu, were coming out and what in the hell are you doing? Because I was out billing every station in the whole state except for four, the top four in Oahu. So that was just unheard of back then. But I have this unique ability to, when I listen to an album, I can go, these are going to be the hits, and I have a really good sense on music flow. I know when DJs are talking the right speak. I just come up with a really cohesive feel that the station is actually your station as a listener. And I would also, this is but sort of a secret, I did not do any audio processing. There are songs that we played on the station where you'd go, oh my gosh, I never knew there was a triangle going on in the back of this song. The audio quality, the stereo separation, the fidelity was unbelievable. I would have engineers visit the island and call us up and says, what are you guys doing? I've never heard a station with such a high quality. And when you don't compress and you don't over equalize, the listener doesn't get fatigued. Now, all of these people running their stations max, they've got rid of dynamics, so they're taking a limiter and they're pushing it up to the 100% mode, and you're just seeing the needle just move a little bit, almost standing straight up and down, no dynamics. And they'll push out like too much bass, or they push out a little bit too much in the mid range, or the highs are too prominent. And the listener will not realize they're getting fatigued. They will actually tune out and away from the station
Mm.
subconsciously.
I didn't even
there's
realize they compressed it that much over the air.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. But yeah, I was into the clean machine, plus or minus 3 dB from 50 cycles to 15,000, and was very proud of the signal, the format, and everything we did.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're talking to Jim James, the founder of KCAL FM, a very popular radio station out here in the Inland Empire, Southern California. Jim,
And I thank you for inviting me, man. This has been a ball.
Thank you so much for coming on, Jim. We're gonna have Jim back because Jim's a very interesting man. He has
Oh my gosh, the stories I can tell you.
Yeah, he's got.
Well, we want them all, brother.
Get into that in a big way. Thanks so much for coming on, Jim. I appreciate it, man.
You too. And also Cody, I got a kick out of interacting with you, and I really appreciate the time. And it's been a delight. So.
Jim, it's so nice to meet you, sir. I'm so glad you came on, and
yeah, one of these days we'll meet face to face.
100%.
Have a sip or a coffee or whatever.
I'm in, brother. We'll make it happen. Thank you so much for coming on, Jim.
Big hugs. You're welcome. Thanks, guys.
All right, everybody. Until next time, thanks for listening. Have a good one. Peace.
Peace out, guys.